Warning, 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 there is a catastrophic design flaw in the Xbox Series X, according to the headlines you might be seeing floating around today. Let me quote you one right here. The Xbox Series X gets so hot, a journalist has claimed to burn their hand on it. The only problem is every word of that headline is a lie. Number one, the person they're claiming to burn their hand isn't a journalist or an editor at CNET, and it's a long way from being a journalist as far as I'm concerned, and I'm going to throw any shade, but come on, it's the Giant Bomb podcast. I don't think any of those people even put journalist on their own business card. In fact, on his own Twitter, he calls himself an editor. The other lie in that headline is he didn't claim to burn his hand. What happened was, on the Giant Bomb podcast, he was lifting up the sample unit, the pre-production Xbox that he had sent in from Xbox so they could start preparing some pre-launch coverage and material of stuff for the CNET websites of various kinds. And he pulled out the SSD storage expansion card thingy from Seagate and he went, oh, bloody hell, that's quite hot.
It's humongous.
Hey, you
want to see something super small? Look at this friggin' thing.
Jeff just unzipped
it's
his
like
pants.
the
Oh, that's the part.
Oh, it's on fire. It's super hot.
He didn't burn his hand. He was just surprised by how hot it is. And quite frankly, if he actually knew anything about the technology he was there to talk about, he wouldn't have been surprised because inside that storage expansion thing is basically one of these, an NVMe SSD drive. These have been around for quite some time now in PCs. We're very familiar with them. And guess what? The normal operating temperature for one of these things under load is about 70 degrees Celsius. And I'm here to tell you, if you touch something that is 70 degrees Celsius, you're going to go, oh, bloody hell, that's quite warm. Pretty much like that guy did. Even when they're not under load, the average operating temperature for these things is somewhere between 40 and 60 degrees Celsius, depending on, how they're fitted and whether or not the motherboard has a decent heat spreader or not on it. And look, this one here has a great big lump of copper built onto it to help dissipate that heat, to help spread that heat out, because these things are, they're happiest. They work best when they're not sort of overheating, of course. They do work best at warm temperatures, surprisingly enough. Unlike a lot of PC components, which, the cooler you get them, the better off you are. These things kind of like a toasty, consistent temperature to work at the most efficient. It's kind of odd, but yeah. I mean, there's a reason that has a great big slab of copper on it. And there's a reason every decent motherboard with a slot or two for one of these has a heat spreader on it of some kind. A heat sink, a heat spreader, thermal pads, something to help dissipate and spread the heat out from that these things generate. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why the highest performance external SSDs that have one of these inside it, there's a reason that these are usually, well, the good ones at least, have metal cases on them to help dissipate that heat. And by the way, the PlayStation 5 is going to have exactly the same issue because that has just a socket for one of these. We don't know exactly which ones are compatible yet because Sony are being kind of hush-hush about that. We do know that a normal one perhaps won't fit and some might, some won't. We're going to have to wait and see on that. It's ridiculous, which is one of the things that is good about what Xbox is doing, but also Xbox is doing a bad thing as well. We'll circle back to that and later on in the video. We'll talk about the approach that PlayStation versus Xbox are taking to their expandable storage and why Xbox are doing it a smart but annoying way and PlayStation are doing it in a dumb but also annoying way because Sony. Do you know what else is hot? But I mean hot in a kind of metaphorical way instead of a literal way. It's hot when you guys leave a comment and do the thumb, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those kind of algorithm fighting things that we have to do just so I have a chance of, the occasional eyeball falling upon my videos because of the evils of the robotic overlord that is the YouTube algorithm, which is destroying lives as we speak. So do your thing. Just a little effort to fight against it, please. It's super hot. But like I said, if the journalist in question, Jeff Buckler, had known anything about what he's talking about, he wouldn't have been surprised that these things are hot under operation because that's normal. And I know your next question is going to be, well, isn't that going to be a problem for people swapping these things in and out? I mean, they're designed to be interchangeable. Well, no, because they're not going to be hot swapped all the time like a GameCube memory card. They're like a terabyte or more in size. These things are, or well, not these things, but the Xbox version are designed to be expandable storage. You buy one, you plug it in, you get an extra terabyte of game storage or media storage or whatever. You don't swap it out every 5 minutes. It's just designed in that little enclosure to make it easy for a user to install, as opposed to the way PlayStation do it. Again, we'll circle back to that. And Jeff himself has had to come out on Twitter already, trying to calm the situation down, trying to stop people misquoting him, trying to stop people claiming that he burned his hand when he clearly didn't burn his hand. He's on Twitter saying, getting a lot of chatter regarding the Xbox Series X heat. On Beastcast, I said it was toasty, and that's exactly what it was. I've read stories that are using the Beastcast segment to support claims that Series X has a heat problem, and I would disagree with making that assumption. So now he's talking in more general terms about the heat that the Xbox generates, and this is a thing we've seen from other sources as well. I think one French journalist they made a statement that was translated to say it runs like a fireplace or something like that. Again, that means it's doing its job. Exhausting heat is a good thing. Now, let's take another example, practical, real-world example that we already know about. This is let me turn it up the right way, even though I think you can't even see it. Yeah, you can kind of see it if I'm holding up the right way. Okay, so this is a AMD Ryzen CPU. These things, under load, can go up to 100 degrees C. It's not ideal you want to keep them sort of at 90 or below, but they will survive and work happily at 100 degrees Celsius. That's the boiling temperature of water. And I'm here to tell you, if you've ever touched one of these under operation or anything around them while they're under operation, swapping a CPU out and you haven't given it time enough to cool down, or your CPU heatsink is kind of crap or anything, you're gonna go, oh, bloody hell, that's quite hot. And you might actually literally burn yourself one of these because, again, boiling temperature of water. This is a Radeon RX 5700 XT. Again, similar in the same technology family. Both these things are the same architecture family of what's going to be in both the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And let me tell you, as someone who has reviewed graphics cards repeatedly for many years now, which means, testing one graphics card, pulling one out, swapping another one in, testing that, pulling that out, swapping another one. If you don't give these things time to cool down before you touch them, you're going to go, oh, bloody hell, that's hot too. Because guess what? These things run hot too. I know. Shocking plot twist at this point in time, isn't it? The average operating temperature for a GPU, well, it depends on the architecture, but in general, what you're looking for, fingers crossed, if it's got a good cooler on it, the chip will be running at about 60 to 70 degrees Celsius. They can, again, like the CPUs, they can happily live up to 90, and some architectures up to 100 degrees Celsius without doing any permanent damage to themselves. And a lot of CPUs and GPUs are designed to throttle themselves if they get too hot, so they slow themselves down so they don't accidentally do damage to themselves by getting too hot if the cooler is not doing its job or whatever. But the point is, if you touch one of these things, when they're operating, you're going to go, oh, bloody hell, that's hot. So if you're seeing reports around that the Xbox Series X is expelling a lot of heat, that's a good thing. That means that the cooling system is working because it's taking the heat away from the things that are making the heat and exhausting it into the environment. There's a reason why when you see, high-end PCs, gaming PCs, they're in big boxes with lots of air volume inside, with, 2 fans at the front, maybe a third fan at the back, maybe another fan or 2 on the CPU itself, between 1 and 3 fans on the GPU itself, all to move air through to cool these things down. And even if you're dealing with a liquid-cooled system, you're seeing a radiator with massive thermal capacity there, big lump of copper or aluminum or whatever, that's got 2 or 3 fans on it, sometimes 4, 6, and all of this is in aid of taking the heat that these things generate and moving them away from these things so they can keep working at their best capacity. Because like I said, if they get too hot, they're designed to slow themselves down so they don't catch on fire or, melt themselves or melt whatever they're attached to, like the CPU socket, for example, usually plastic. So when you see someone claiming that the PlayStation 5 and/or the Xbox Series X are exhausting a lot of heat, guess what? That is a good thing. It's one of the ways I check to make sure my PC cooling is working. I put my hand near the main exhaust of the case, and if there's a lot of heat coming out of that, I go, okay, well, that heat's going out of the case and not staying in the case. That's a good thing. Have I made my point yet? I feel like I have. So let's circle back to that secondary thing I was talking about in the way that the PlayStation 5 versus the Xbox are handling their expandable storage. Now, like I said earlier in the video, the Xbox have a little sort of self-contained module that you can sort of slide into the socket on the back of the thing. That's a really good thing because it means a user upgrade for your storage space. When you exhaust the storage space, or you've got too many games sitting on your Xbox, you need more space. You can just, buy, let's pretend this is one of those things. And I do have Seagate sending me one, by the way. I will be making a proper video about this, but let's pretend this is it. So you buy this and you go, slot in the machine, and away you go. easy peasy, and it's going to live there for probably years until you need to upgrade it again, or maybe you get a second one, you're using even more space, you need another terabyte or two of game storage space, then you might start swapping them in and out. And even then, the old one might have your old games on it that you only take out every once in a while when you need to play those games, because you're obviously not playing those games much anymore, because but you don't want to delete them for whatever reason to make room. And the point I'm trying to make is it's not designed to be swapped in and out constantly. So that getting warm, even surprising to the touch, is not really an issue. And like I said, the average under load operating temperature of one of these NVMe SSDs is about 70 degrees Celsius. So it'll be surprising to touch, but it will not burn you. It won't do any damage to your skin. This is the whole reason why we have reflexes go, oh, that's hot. So we don't hold on to hot things for long periods of time, long enough to do damage to ourselves. So let's now talk about the way the PlayStation 5 is doing things. They're not using a little slot-in external module. You literally have to partially dismantle your PlayStation 5 to upgrade its storage, which is similar to how it's done with the existing PlayStation. Pain in the ass. It's going to put off a lot of users from doing it. I mean, for crying out loud, I know people who are too intimidated to do their own graphics card upgrade. Like, I have a friend who I literally had to talk through installing a capture card on her machine because she was afraid she would screw it up. Even though you literally can't, because they only plug in one way. You can't get it wrong. But people are intimidated by opening things up and filling with the guts of it because they don't understand the guts of it. So with the PlayStation 5, the operation for putting an SSD in there is very straightforward for those of us who do this kind of stuff all the time. But for the average layman, having to take off the cover, undo a couple of screws, get into the little drive bay, slide in one of these vulnerable looking things with these exposed pins, slap that down. There's a screw that has to go in there to retain it. Then you put it back in, you screw on the little retaining plate, then you put the case thing back on again. That's something the average user is not going to want to do, certainly not on their own. If they don't understand these things, they're going to be scared that they're going to hurt something. And you certainly can, with these raw things, if you don't treat them with, the minimum of respect, you can sort of easily do a little bit of damage to these things. They're not exactly robust, which is why I like how the Xbox are doing it, which rather handily circles us all the way back to where we started, quoting some of these articles that are claiming that a journalist burnt his hand or things like that. I want to read you a quote from one of those. Not only that, but he claims to have burnt his hand, no he didn't, by touching the console's infamously expensive storage expansion. Infamously expensive, really. The SSD used in the Xbox is, like I said, it's basically internally it's an NVMe drive, because these are the fastest commercially available drives around. PC users have been using these for quite some time now. That's what it is. It's just in a custom little case to make it easier for users to slot it in and out, where the PlayStation is just using sort of the raw version. That's fine. It's not infamously expensive. Price these things. All right, we're talking about $220 odd for a 1 terabyte Xbox One X SSD expansion, right? I don't know whether it's the official price yet, but that seems to be the price most people are quoting in various articles. I'm not sure what the source of that, but it sounds about right. Because guess what? That's what these cost. Exactly the same thing, just in a different form factor. The same internals, the same chips in there, the same technology in there. It's just, this one's got a USB port on the back, and the Xbox One has some sort of proprietary connector in a little sort of proprietary little case. But it's the same thing inside this. So the PlayStation storage is going to be the same cost, by the way. It's going to be slightly cheaper. Well, depending. Because that's the other thing about the Xbox One. It's proprietary. So right now, only Seagate are making them. There's no competition to help drive the prices down. That said, again, they do appear to be priced fairly because, the $200 odd for a terabyte is what you're paying for an external NVMe drive right now anyway. At least you are for the top-end performance models like this. And on the PlayStation side of things, we know it has a standard, what we call an M.2 connection on it, because we've seen that. We've known that for quite some time now. Sony have been open about that for ages now. They said, well, it's going to be expandable with an M.2 drive. But what we don't know is because of the way that little bay is constructed, there are certain standards for these things. This is a fairly common one. This will fit in pretty much anything that has an M.2 drive in it, but there are shorter versions of this as well. But there's also versions like this, which come with a great big copper slug on it to help dissipate the heat. And I could probably safely assume I won't be able to use this in the PlayStation because of, the limitations of how they've designed the thing. There's probably not enough room for this thing. So we don't know which drives are going to be compatible just physically. Technology-wise, in theory, these should work perfectly fine because it is just a NVMe M.2 drive slot. But, physically, size-wise, we don't know what Sony are doing there. They say they're going to have a short list of known compatible drives, so you can just buy the one you want and everything. But are they doing something extra tricky with that? Is there some sort of licensing agreement that other companies are going to have to pass? So it's just so Sony get a slice of the pie, because we know Sony like to get a slice of the pie every time they sell anything. The picture on that is not terribly clear yet, but we do know that Xbox are doing it the proprietary way, so they can control things a little bit better. And I don't know, what the licensing agreement there is between them and Seagate and things like that. We currently have no idea whether, companies like WD, also famous for the storage, are going to be able to produce these things. Are they going to be sort of third-party knockoffs? Is there some sort of weird security thing in there, like Sony have done before on their sort of memory cards? What would they call it? Memory gate. That was it, wasn't it? We don't know if there's something like that involved in this system, whether or not this... it's just... Sony just really need to communicate better with their stuff, don't they? Anyway, so hopefully this has cleared some things up for you, people who are not particularly technologically inclined and sort of aren't deeply familiar with the operational experience of these things, and have never tried to swap out an NVMe drive just after turning off the machine and gone, oh, bloody hell, that's hot. Because they are. Thank you as always to the glorious patrons up above there. Your support means a tremendous amount to me, and I hope you enjoyed the secret that I posted yesterday. Excited about that content coming up. I am Blunty. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.